Hello, this is Burt, Managing Editor of Biometric Update, here with Dave Burnett of ZeroBiometrics. Dave is the head of product technology and commercial strategy at ZeroBiometrics and also has extensive experience in biometrics and authentication even prior to joining ZeroBiometrics. Thank you for taking the time to explain what's happening at ZeroBiometrics for us today, Dave.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I am as well. I just want to briefly mention that ZeroBiometrics has developed a way to perform biometric authentication that avoids the data privacy and security risks traditionally associated with biometrics. This technology is known as ZeroFace, and it uses biometrics-derived cryptography. We're going to discuss what that means, how it works, and what the implications are for online security. So without further ado, Dave, ZeroBiometrics has a vision for modernizing biometric authentication by bridging biometrics and cryptography in a novel way. Can you start by giving us a rundown on how that works?
Sure. So it's technology that's been under development for some time, and I've considered this to be this bridge between biometrics and cryptography to be, a source of major innovation opportunity, but it's been unsolved because, our faces change, right? And keys are supposed to stay the same, which is why there hasn't really been a great bridge between these two. For instance, this morning I had a beard that I shaved before this particular interview. If you looked at my face then versus now, you would see a significant change. But we need, if we're going to use keys for authentication, we need to have keys that don't change. That's the fundamental innovation that we've built at ZeroBiometrics, is the ability to look at your face under a variety of different conditions with change over time, changes in glasses, facial hair, hair length, all of those kinds of normal changes, and still ultimately generate the same public and private key pair, assuming you want asymmetric keys as the output and you want to do some sort of digital signing. That's the core innovation behind what we do. And there's multiple irreversible transformations from the biometric space into the cryptography space in the process chain that we go through.
So we're really talking about a biometrics innovation fueling a cryptographic innovation. Is that a fair way to think of it?
It really is. And in fact, it wasn't until I'd been working with ZeroBiometrics for about a year before it really dawned on me that in many ways, we're really a security and cryptography company. Yes, we do biometrics, right? But I would have thought that it would have dawned on me sooner because my cryptography experience goes back longer than I care to admit, back to like PGP, encryption days, right? But the really, we are about, first and foremost, we're about security, and we're about the ability to generate, very importantly, ephemeral cryptographic keys, meaning the keys in the private portion doesn't even exist unless your face is present. And that is really a security story that is backed and started with a biometric process, but it becomes about security and in many ways traditional PKI, but with a lot of the traditional problems with PKI and secure key storage removed.
Right. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit more about the contrast, right? And when you talk about cryptography and authentication in a secure way with keys, I'm sure that a lot of people watching this interview will think of some popular authentication methods or systems. I think most of our audience is probably familiar with public and private keys for authentication, but how is this different from, say, the FIDO Alliance and what they're doing? Can you explain that contrast a little more?
Sure. And let me also address something else that's essential to answering your question, right? I would say 1 in 4 conversations that I have with people, when I say what I just said, which is we take biometric information and transform it into keys reliably, and consistently and stable keys over time, I get a certain amount of pushback and just very simple, I don't believe that that's possible from folks, and usually very astute, learned folks, right? So that is why, in fact, there's a core patent that we have around this process, because it has been such a challenge in the industry. And we're not the first person or group of people to think about, wouldn't it be cool if? Wouldn't it be cool if you could take true data from your face, the entropy, using a cryptographic term, from your face, and use it to seed key generation, right? That concept's been out there, but doing it reliably has been extremely difficult because of the phase changes and lighting changes and so forth. So now, with that to one side, let's come back to your question about FIDO and other types of PKI. So in many ways, right, PKI imposes an additional security burden above and beyond traditional biometrics. I mean, we all know traditional biometrics, especially face biometrics or finger or eyes or whatever, there's a security burden that occurs because you're storing some sensitive information about what your face or your eyes or your fingerprint looks like, right? Now, there's lots of talk about, those being encrypted or protected or sharded, or there's all sorts of protection mechanisms, but still you're fundamentally saving something that's sensitive, right? And it's even more sensitive when you take it off of the device and put it into the cloud. We can, relatively speaking, trust our mobile devices because they have hardened trust zone or, secure elements built into the devices. But it's still a security burden that has to be addressed. Now, PKI introduces a second security burden because now you're generating keys, private keys that have to be saved. And unless your device has, your personal phone has secure storage for your keys, that's a very dangerous thing to do, right? To save keys remotely. It's also very dangerous to take your private keys and trust them to a third party up in the cloud. So the burdens that both traditional biometrics and traditional PKI impose on the authentication landscape creates a lot of challenges. Now, FIDO, which I love FIDO, to be very honest. I've been involved in FIDO since even before the FIDO organization was stood up. So I'm excited to see the progress that it's been making over the past several years, the past 10 years, but especially the momentum over the last couple of years. So we're not replacing FIDO necessarily, right? What we're doing is, and in fact, we generate keys that can be used within the FIDO ecosystem. The public-private key pairs that we generate are actually, you can choose the same type of key gen options in our stack as you would do within a FIDO authentication stack. But there's no biometric data being saved. There's no keys that are being saved. So you can do FIDO if you want to do FIDO. You can do FIDO on a device that doesn't have any of that security hardware. So you get all of the benefit of a PKI architecture. It doesn't have to be FIDO, but it could be FIDO without that security burden that we talked about, both around biometric data and saving and protecting biometric data, and then saving and protecting keys.
Okay, so there's a lot to get into there. So if my biometrics are not saved, my key's not saved, what gets saved? What makes my key mine? I guess it's central to part of that equation.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, right? And it's not magic, right? We do have to save something that relates to you, and that's probably one of the first things that we have to do when we talk with customers, is to make sure that we communicate. No, we do have to save something, because people tend to get so excited about the technology that they think, oh, okay, I don't need anything. I can just look at our zero face technology can just look at your face and always generate, the correct hash. And, it does that, but we do have to save information. But this is where it gets really interesting. Like I said, we're not saving biometric data and we're not saving keys. So what we are saving is a zero knowledge proof about where there's interesting information on your face that can be used for the purposes of generating data stably and consistently, and then turning it into, hashes with SHA-256, and then into keys using OpenSSL. So we don't save any biometric information that's identifiable, reversible. No, there isn't a template. There's not a traditional biometric template. No, it's just a zero knowledge proof, which is simply, it's a way of, it's a way of saying, well, if you look in these locations on your face, you're going to get some data. And then if you run it through a formula as part of the zero knowledge proof, you'll get this answer, right? And so we save the answer and we save where to look, but your face has to be present to recalculate the answer. And if your face isn't present, you're not going to get any answer. Or even better, if you take the file with my information, which we call a ZeroMap, by the way, if I take my ZeroMap and apply it to your face, I'll get a hash, but it's going to be drawing data from the wrong places on your face with incorrect information. So it will generate a hash, but it won't be the correct result.
So that hash doesn't match, gets rejected, and your security is maintained.
Exactly. So that's really that's also the part of the core innovation in all of this. So there's nothing saved that's sensitive, and therefore that file, the ZeroMap, it can be easily ported across different devices, right? It's not sensitive. Now, even though it's not sensitive, right? If you recall, I mentioned that, we consider ourselves to be as much a security company as a biometrics company. I should share that, in my time doing biometrics and identity with other companies, I've seen some incredibly insecure implementations of biometrics by very well-meaning engineers, right? That just didn't understand the security layers. I mean, you can have a fantastic software engineer that doesn't understand security in depth, right? So we've, additionally to the fact that we're not saving biometric information, we also, throughout our complete system architecture, we've engineered multiple layers of defenses, whether it's the ZeroMap, which is AES encrypted with a key that's unique to each customer, or whether it's defenses that we have against injection attacks and, copying of data from one company to another. We've designed the whole system architecture with security in mind, in a way that is just not typical. Biometrics companies typically say, here's a product, security, that's up to you to implement. We provide a holistic solution, above and beyond the built-in kind of, well, we're not saving anything security, and if it's not saved, you can't really steal it, right? Which is massive security, right? It's we really take the attitude of like, well, yeah, you don't want to let the horse out of the barn, but it's even better if you don't have a horse, if you don't even necessarily have a barn, and then you don't want to worry about how you protect the horse that left the barn, right? So it's a different approach.
So I mean, the implementation, these, let's say, inconsistent implementation of biometrics in the market, certainly part of where the interest is coming from in the product that you've developed here, and difficult enough, as you say, for even knowledgeable people to really wrap their heads around, but more difficult than that is how you get to this point. So is the ZeroMap, is that really the core innovation that ZeroBiometrics has made to enable this system?
It's a piece of it, right? What it contains is the data about you, the zero knowledge proof for you, that in conjunction with, a scan of your face, can be used by our algorithm to generate, both intermediate SHA-256 hashes and then ultimately cryptographic keys. So it's the personalized piece of the innovation that's unique to you, but it fits into a larger stack that while yes, we have primarily designed it for endpoint deployment on mobile devices, it can also be deployed server side, and there's server search one-to-end capabilities. There's really, these pieces can be put in different locations to achieve different service goals that a customer might have.
Right. So, with that, the sort of I guess sort of reference or main target implementation or primary target implementation on mobile devices. That kind of brings up the potential, the security potential and advantages of native device biometrics, right? So, I noticed that, in your materials, you've got essentially the promise of stronger privacy protection and stronger assurance than native device biometrics. So, how does that work?
Yeah.
How can that be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it really goes back to the fact that um, whenever you build a safe, right, like a physical safe, right, there's a safe cracker out there that sooner or later, with enough time, is going to figure out a way to crack that safe, right? We don't keep data that needs to be in a safe. That's the fundamental difference, right? And this twofer, right, that we provide, the 2-for-1 benefit of no biometric data saved and no keys being saved, is absolutely massive, right? So, if you lose your device, let's just, a very common scenario, you lose your phone, right? If someone gets your phone, there's all sorts of ways to break into the device. There's, inexpensive ways that are harder. There's more expensive ways that, typically governments would use. But there's ways to break into phones based off of zero-day exploits and so forth. And once you get in, then there's, other issues around, well, what can you do and can you pass biometric verification? I don't want to at all imply that those devices are not designed for security. They are. I've been involved in the design of several Android mobile devices. There's fantastic intents, but still you get back to the fundamental issue. If it's a safe, someone will figure out how to break into the safe, right? If there is no safe, if there is no private key on the device, it can't be stolen. It can't be accessed if it simply isn't there. And especially if you think about it from situations where you might have some data stored server side, if the service provider doesn't have a key to your data, then they don't have to be responsive to a subpoena as well. So there's all sorts of implications that come up when your keys don't exist unless your face is present. And that's, I think, a major innovation around, and it's an implication that frankly takes time to sink in because we're so used to doing things in the old way, quote unquote, old way.
Sure, and I'm certainly used to thinking about biometrics and biometric template storage in terms of the secure element's a good place to keep this. But it sounds like you're suggesting that in the case of really sensitive information that you're relying on to grant you access, there are limitations there that you think you're able to get beyond with this system.
And let's pretend for a moment that there are no safe crackers, right? Which there are, but let's pretend that there are no safe crackers. The current model still requires that you have secure elements and secure hardware on a device to use it for biometric authentication. And it means that if you set up a second device, you have to enroll on the second device. And fortunately now with FIDO and passkeys and key synchronization, you can at least copy your private keys over, although that makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but you can do it, right? We don't require you to do any of that, right? There's no security hardware required. If you want to enroll first on your phone and then you want to authenticate on some old tablet that you have laying around that has no secure hardware, no biometrics, no problem. We work great in that scenario. So it's really portable in a way. So and that is a second significant distinction beyond just the pure security. It's a very strong security profile and highly portable. So lost phone, who cares? Just download your ZeroMap to the new device and you're back. You're up and running.
Sounds pretty convenient. And I do want to come back to the portability potential and the benefits of that. But you also mentioned responsiveness to subpoenas, and I've just been thinking as we talk about template protection about the treatment of biometric templates as sensitive data under GDPR, for instance. So how do regulators look at this technology? Yeah, I mean, is ZeroBiometrics key generation, how does it fit in with emerging approaches and how they are sort of looked at in the industry and by regulators?
Sure. And, I think it's important just to state up front, I'm not a regulatory expert by any means, right? I'm a biometrics and security and identity expert. And what I'll say is that the privacy regulations that have been put in place in Europe, in Illinois, and elsewhere, everyone who's watching this is aware of what's happening on a regulatory basis. They're starting from a general premise that your face data is sensitive. Right? Well, everyone knows that your public key or that a public key for you is not sensitive in identifying information.
Right.
Ultimately, authentication happens, with use of a public key that is generated from your face, and that can be saved. And so, we're not saving what you look like. We're not saving your private key. And that's such a different model that it hasn't gone up for any significant regulatory review. But at the end of the day, it should be viewed very favorably because, again, it's about public keys and verifying, like FIDO does. A nonce gets sent to you, to your device. You sign it with a private key that's unlocked with your face. Well, here we're signing with a key that was generated from your face. So, and then the signed nonce goes back up and then it's validated with a public key. So it's very friendly and it should be easy for regulators to understand. But setting aside the regulatory frameworks, right, there's what the regulations have done in commercial businesses is draw attention to the fact that there are real risks around the loss of biometric data. Right. And in many cases, imposing fines and penalties if sensitive data is released. Well, keep in mind, we're not storing biometric information. So setting aside any of the regulatory implications, if I'm a company that has a lot of server-side biometric templates, I've got a honeypot that's at risk and it's a potential, customer service, reputational liability, even perhaps legal liability if you are in a jurisdiction. We get rid of all of that, right? The data is just gone, right? And what we keep, the ZeroMap, it's not sensitive. So that's of interest in and of itself, separately from how one regulator in one country might look at it versus another regulator.
Okay, so I mean, really, you're skirting, sort of avoiding or dodging the whole issue by skipping the biometric template storage. You just don't have to deal with the same kind of burden.
Yeah, exactly. There isn't the risk. Let me just be really clear. You do not have the same risk. Regulators look at the world sometimes in slightly different ways than we do in the biometrics industry, and especially when you're looking at something so new. I mean, it's taken many years for the regulatory community worldwide to fully get on board with FIDO's concepts, right? It wasn't like FIDO was invented and then a year later, all of the regulators in the world were like, we love FIDO. And that's not what happened, right? So it'll take time for regulators to look at what we're doing, see the parallels to FIDO and KeyGen and all of that. So I don't want to imply that, hey, adopt us and, you don't have to talk with your regulators. No, but the risk is gone. And I think over time, we'll get a very favorable treatment from regulators. And in fact, I think the industry as a whole needs to move, right? We have some patented technology in this area, but whenever someone invents a new mousetrap, there's a lot of people that look at that mousetrap and think I can do even better. So I'm sure there'll be other companies that invent things that do stuff similar to us, because the benefits are just so huge of getting rid of that data.
Absolutely, and I think it seems fair to me to say that this is reflective of an industry trend, a broader industry trend towards using innovative technologies to increase biometric security in just ways that weren't on the table for various reasons not so many years ago.
Yeah, it's very true. I think that there's one distinction that I'd like to make sure that people that watch this video take away, right?
Mhm.
Which I'm thrilled to see that there's work being done around protecting biometric templates, right? But back to my horse and barn analogy, what you're still doing is taking biometric templates and then protecting them, right? Awesome, great. I'm glad that there's awareness of the problem, but we get rid of the biometric data in the first place, and that's a fundamental difference. And there's, you can shard a template and break it up into a million pieces and store it in different places. There's a lot of cryptographic and work that's been done around that, and pure innovation for products in that segment of the commercial market. But you're still dealing with some sensitive data. And how do you protect it? The horse is out of the barn. How do you prevent it from being stolen, right? What we're saying is like, no, just don't have a barn, don't have a horse, just get rid of it. And that's
Absolutely.
the innovation we deliver.
So, as we talk about how different this approach is, what about practical concerns? I'm sure people watching the interview will wonder about speed and about the user experience and all these sort of mundane things that mundane compared to doing biometrics without storing the biometrics, let's say. So is it fast, Dave?
Yeah. So look, one of the things that biometrics, proved, right, is convenience is king, right? Especially, who wants to put in their passcode, 100 times a day, right? We prefer using biometrics. There's no way that we could bring this innovation to the market and say, well, it's really secure, but guess what? It's horrible to use, right? Or that balance between usability and security, it's so often tilted to security alone at the expense of usability. But, on-device biometrics and platforms like FIDO have really driven home the message that you don't have to compromise between usability and security. We've just taken it to a new level with security by getting rid of the underlying data. But yeah, it's just as fast and just as usable as your traditional face authentication.
Okay, and then in terms of how widely the technology can be used, I mean, we've been talking about authentication. We're typically, particularly when we get into like user personal devices and so on, we're talking about one-to-one processes, but not necessarily, right? So, how does zero face work, or does zero face work with one-to-N?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And honestly, we spent a year, just working on this problem because, we made this very secure solution using zero knowledge proofs and some patented technology and, et cetera, to make it highly secure. So how do you do a one-to-N if you don't know what the person looks like, right? Keep in mind too, as all of our viewers will be well aware, if you want to do one-to-N, you have to do that server side, right? So what do you take to the server? Well, you can take a ZeroMap to a server. That's safe. I mean, if you can copy it from device to device, there's no reason why you can't have it on a server. But you don't really, ideally, you don't want to take a raw picture of your face and send it up to the server for matching, right? Because then biometric data has left your device. There are some times and places where companies really like to do that, especially if they have a legal obligation to keep a photo of the person in a separate system from their biometric authentication platform. Like identity providers sometimes literally are required to keep a photo of the person that enrolled in their system. But we wanted to build a solution that didn't require sending face data up, not raw face data. And so we do, in our most secure implementation of Zero Search, we take the biometric data on the local device. We do one of 3 irreversible transformations of the data and by cutting out all the biometric data, it really shrinks down the amount of data that we send up to the server. And keep in mind, it's already irreversibly transformed out of the biometric space to begin with. Then we send it up to the server. And then we basically do this kind of interesting and tricky thing. You may recall that I said that we store where information, where to go on your face. Well, when we send the data up to the server, we do a second transformation and get the where data out of the payload that we get from the mobile device. And again, that where information isn't sensitive. We can then use that where information and basically do a quick search across all the other where information to find similar where data, right? Again, this isn't what you look like. This is just where to look. And we can filter out the vast bulk of faces that have been registered with ZeroMaps by just saying, well, oh, no, this person's face is too different, from that person's face. And we can rank order it. And then we do a search. We then have to take the transformed data and then we apply it, to a subset of the data one after one. So we're basically doing almost like a local zero face operation, but on a limited set. So that's why we can operate with millions of faces server side, but still have the same accuracy level as when we're doing a one-to-one match. And we don't have to get the full biometric data up. It's transformed out of the biometric space. And then we're doing just kind of a brute force search on a subset of the full server side population. It was a little bit technical. I went into a little bit more process flow there. Hopefully that made sense, but if not, please feel free. I can kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah, no, I think I've got that, Dave. And it sounds kind of like the approach that, as you explain it, sounds like taking sort of like a one to large N, and that we would sometimes see in like on like an IDV or identity proofing, or even whatever kind of large scale process, and then using that the ZeroMap, the where data, which is essentially, I don't know if metadata would be the right term to use in this
You could use
case.
metadata. Yeah, you could. I think in this context, metadata would be a term that people would relate to, right? It isn't the underlying data, but it's metadata. Yeah.
derived
Yeah.
data kind of thing, and then that narrows it down to almost like a one to small n sort of type
Yes.
process.
Yes. And it's also sort ordered by likelihood of match, right? Like how
Okay.
close is the where information to you? So typically, although we do have to do, brute force through some, it's usually like in the top 10 or 50 records that we check.
So that keeps things
Yeah, it is. If I
moving.
could just add in one thing, because I mean, if we're talking security architectures, I mean, believe me, I could talk about that for hours. But there's one thing that I'd like to address proactively, right? Which, if people are hearing about, well, okay, once you scan your face with this and you get a ZeroMap, you can get a key, right? Well, wouldn't you be generating a private key on the server for that for me? And do I want that to happen? Especially if all you're trying to do is a one-to-end search, right? You probably want key generation and signing to happen on your device, not server side. Well, one of the things that we do is that we actually use a different data set and a different algorithm when we're doing the server side search. So that server side search cannot generate the same keys that would be generated by your device, right? We've intentionally rotated the key space when we're doing with the data that we preserve server side, so that if, let's say that your server got broken into and all of the data the one-to-N zero search product that we make. If your backend was compromised or an employee stuck in a USB disk and took all the data off the server, they wouldn't be usable on a local device. It's not the same format. It's not the same data structure, and it doesn't generate the same key set that you would get. So it's a quick, easy example, but it's one of dozens of ways that we've engineered security deep into the heart of this and thought proactively about a lot of the very common threat vectors to data loss and data compromise in our platform.
Very good. So that's as you referred to earlier, these many layers that
Yes.
surround the core technology
Yes.
to preserve that security.
Yeah.
So if you're a customer who wants to integrate ZeroBiometrics with a modern identity platform, say that uses a decentralized architecture, a framework that maybe includes blockchain. Can you do this? And does it involve, particular challenges or bestow particular benefits on top of the security that you're providing elsewhere?
A fantastic question. So let me just refresh on a core fundamental aspect of our tech. When you register your face or verify your face, or the traditional terms for you enroll your face or you authenticate with your face, in our process, you send in a nonce for both of those activities. We sign the nonce, and then we return the signed nonce and the public key to whatever called us, right? Whether it's an app or a server or what have you. Yeah. So that's what you get. And of course, the nonce is really up to the customer to decide what to put in there. But there's all sorts of useful things that you could put in there, like geolocations or a customer UUID or a date timestamp. There's an infinite number of things that you could put into the nonce. But when it's signed, and that's signed data is sent back to the app, which could save it locally or could send it to a server. That's really safe data to store because there's no personally identifying information, and all you have to store is the signed nonce and the public key. Now, you could absolutely apply that to a traditional database and store a record of every single authentication event that I do. Let's say if I'm a bank and I want to keep track of every single login and every single funds transfer. Well, you can put in a transaction number as the nonce, and we can sign it with your face, and it can go into a traditional database. Or if you want to tie it into a blockchain-like system, you can absolutely put records on the public blockchain by having us using our digital signing capability. And this is where it's really important to distinguish between what we do and what device level kind of traditional platforms like Face ID or fingerprint on Android or FIDO on top of both of those, right? So the keys are based and have to have your face present. So every single saved signed transaction, it's non-repudiation that that's actually you. It's not your device that's signing, right? So you can unlock a key with your face on an iPhone, for instance, and then you can sign a transaction. But that key really belongs to the device, and it is generated on that device and is signed on, right? It's not necessarily legally, empirically drawn from your face entropy. So you can't claim if there's a transaction that's signed with your private key and verified with your face public key, you can't claim that's not you. You can't claim that your kid logged into your device and transferred money. It doesn't work, right? That's a significant benefit. And then it's a significant benefit, significant difference. Then you tie it into all sorts of other things like blockchain, as you mentioned, and other advanced systems. So
you've really got a a level of flexibility then that is, maybe not what people would associate immediately with new, innovations in cryptography, or even, advanced security methods where you tend to think of it in terms of this particular slot, put the round slot and the round peg in the round hole kind of thing. But really a sort of more broadly applicable technology.
Yep, it really is. And, even though we don't require FIDO in any respect, I think anyone that loves FIDO should love this even more because it's got all of the same benefits, except the keys are drawn from your face, right? They're not stored on the device. And so it's much more flexible, works across devices, etc. So, and, if you just love what we're doing, you don't have to use FIDO. It's not dependent upon a FIDO stack, but it certainly could be integrated in with a FIDO client and used, with all of the kind of traditional, FIDO stacks and FIDO solutions that are out there.
For sure. And then you've been talking a little bit about portability across devices. Also raises the specter of account recovery. And I'm guessing you have a good answer for how that works with biometrics as well.
Yeah, we've supported account recovery in basic forms from day one, right? Because our ZeroMap file is safe to copy, right? I mean, you could, if you wanted, you could transfer it from one device to another with Bluetooth or with an NFC tap. Or you can even display it as a QR code and print it out or save it as a picture and email it to yourself, whatever you want to do. So from day one, we've supported that kind of recovery so that if I lose my phone, I can grab my new phone and just scan a QR code. No server required, nothing required at all. But since many customers, customers of ours want their end users to have seamless recovery experiences, they don't like OTP costs. They don't like knowledge-based authentication approaches, right? It introduces friction, right, for their customers. Well, okay, so we've built an extension on top of our Zero Search capability that enables, true 100% biometric account recovery, where we kind of do a one-to-end search. And then if there's a match for you, we have an encrypted copy of your ZeroMap that we then push down to whatever device you happen to be logging in from. So again, that is separately encrypted, right? Getting back to security issues, that data, we don't use it for searching. We have different data that we use for searching, but we have the backup copy of your ZeroMap that we can then push down to your device as part of our Zero Recovery platform. So, OTPs, knowledge-based, gone, unless you have some desire to keep them, but most people don't like them very much. And there's expense associated with that. So.
And growing regulatory pressure and so on as well on that front, right? So, so that is very important, obviously, to have. So you referred earlier to the greater stack, the layers of security technology that go around the ZeroMap and the key generation technology. You referred to injection attacks. That's a very hot topic at Biometric Update these days, of course. So I wanted to ask about injection attacks and also about I guess the sort of less in favor cousin presentation attacks. Still very prominent, right? I mean, these are two going concerns for anybody who's using well, I mean, it's not just biometrics, but certainly very prominent in our space. So how does ZeroBiometrics protect against those kinds of attacks?
Yeah, so injection attacks, I think of there being two primary categories of injection attacks, or one of which is stolen biometric data, right? Or stolen ZeroMap in our case, which doesn't have biometric information. If I'm an attacker and let's say I'm doing, I get access to your device and I want to steal your ZeroMap. Well, we've already talked about how that's not going to do much good for you, but let's just hypothetical, right? You steal it. right? Well, can you use it with another customer of ours? And at the very beginning, very earliest outset, we said, nope, we're going to prevent that type of injection attack. And each ZeroMap file is encrypted with a different AES key for every single customer. So if I have a ZeroMap file in my banking app A, and it saves a local ZeroMap, that isn't copyable into banking app B, right? And use there because it doesn't use the same AES key, and app B doesn't know what app A's key is. We've also made that key very difficult to steal because it's generated at runtime. That AES key, the encryption key, is generated at runtime. It's not actually persisted in the device itself, and it's generated using on-device data and data that we provide. There's many layers of security. So that's one kind of injection attack. But these days, I think you mentioned the hotness or the urgency of the topic has to do with video injection attacks. And there's a couple of things that we bring to the table. First of all, of course, we license in third-party liveness and injection attack technology, that's gone through iBeta processes, iBeta 2. Of course, that's a minimum. But if a customer is particularly concerned about that, we can do inter-frame matching of all the frames of video that we see and for a user's face at time of verification to do an internal consistency check across all of those frames that we see. Now, that does mean that you have to authenticate for a longer period of time. You can't just do like like a 100 millisecond authentication event, but you can get additional security where literally we go look at the keys, the hashes and the keys that are generated inter-frame and make sure that there's both logical, that first of all, there shouldn't be progression, any changes between those, they should all be matching, or if there are errors, that they're within a statistically acceptable error zone, where in some cases, like if, I don't know, if you were looking away from the camera when you started the authentication event, that first frame of video or the first 5 frames of video might fail. Okay, fine, but we can look at the time when they failed and a bunch of other heuristics to say, no, we have a high enough confidence that we're not getting arbitrary frames of video injected. Now, if you're talking about injecting AI frames from start to finish, that's where we rely upon third-party technology, right? So there's lots of attack vectors and flavors and remedies. We keep on top of what's happening in general, and we definitely apply some of our own technology in addition to third-party tech to support solutions to this.
So a mix of your own proprietary technology and third-party providers, but it sounds like at sort of the most basic element is that the face, while it may be the same, is not going to have the same output due to the different zero maps.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Correct?
Exactly. Right. And in fact, we're, in the testing that we've done with third-party agencies, we have a very, very high accuracy level as well. It depends upon the configuration that you want, but, that's the other part of our security model is that we have configurations that go up to 1 in a billion level of accuracy, and not our testing, that's independent testing with a third-party lab. And we can, of course, dial it down to the more typical industry standard of 1 in a million or 1 in 100 million. But if you're in a scenario where you have a lot of concern about these kinds of risks, you can dial up the security to some of the best that's available on the market.
Very good. Very good. So that's all. This is on the market today. This is, you have customers. I was reading about an insurance customer, Web3 insurance customer the other day. But I'd like to ask you about the future of biometric and cryptographic authentication. What's on the horizon for us? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that that when I answer this question, and several I've been privileged that several people have asked me this from customers and from colleagues in the industry. I always try to step back for a moment and answer it thinking about at this point, 20 plus years of time in this space, and not just with my ZeroBiometrics role. Because I think these problems that we face are bigger than any one company, right? And it doesn't help if I just give a biased answer about that just so happens to be excellent for ZeroBiometrics outlook. I said earlier that we have some IP in this space, but whenever anyone invents a new mousetrap, that people go, aha, there's a new way to do things. We as an industry have to move away from storing sensitive data. If there's one lesson that's become clear over the last 3, 4, 5 years, is that we're in an endless game of cat and mouse with very sophisticated attackers that have significant motivation and financial resources to break into all of our information systems. As a skeptic, I would say there's no such thing as a company that can keep their customer data or their biometric data or any type of data completely secure. It's just not possible, right? And so protection mechanisms are great, but we need to engineer out the data in the first place. And it's kind of funny, actually, the way biometrics fundamentally work today, the traditional biometrics, taking a picture of your face, reducing it to some data set, and then taking another picture and comparing them. That was invented in 1960, right? And if you think back to then, computers were the size of a house. You didn't have to worry about data loss and data breaches, right? We weren't carrying supercomputers in our pockets, right? And there's very little technology that we use today that dates back to the 1960s. This predates the internet, this predates ARPANET, this predates all sorts of. We're well overdue for a change in the fundamental model where we move from storing data to zero knowledge proofs and verification results based off of that, and then into keys. So whether it's our IP or someone else invents something like this, we have to acknowledge that the threat landscape has changed. The basic model of biometrics was built for a different era that is long gone, and we have to get rid of biometric information. I don't want to just protect it once it's captured, right? I think sharding is cool. I think there's all sorts of fantastic things that you can do to protect templates, but we just have to get rid of templates. And that's kind of something I fervently believe, that whether we're the company that popularizes this model, or whether it's us and 2 or 3 other companies that do things, we have to shift, because there's no way to keep this data secure, not even on a secure element, not even on your device. It's just once you build a safe, someone's going to figure out how to break into that safe.
So keep the biometrics, but not store it somewhere.
Keep all the convenience of face recognition, keep the speed, and actually improve the security of our digital life online by creating keys that are tied to our faces and can only be recomputed when our faces are present. So multiple advances, right? Multiple advances come when you just say, okay, how do we solve this problem without the data being persisted on devices or servers?
Very good. So that's how you get rid of persistent data.
Yes.
Making use of biometric processes. So Dave, for people watching this who'd like to learn more about what you're doing and how they can integrate ZeroBiometrics technology into their applications, how should they get in touch?
They can send an email to me. I'm david.burnett@zerobiometrics.com, or go to our website, www.zerobiometrics.com. I think I just dated myself by including the www. But go to zerobiometrics.com, and then there's all sorts of both information there and call to action forms that you can pop in your information and reach out to us.
Absolutely. Great. And you can read more about ZeroBiometrics as well on Biometric Update. We've been following developments with great interest, and we'll continue to do so. We know that the constant stream of data breach notifications and fraud reports that many businesses need to strengthen the security of their authentication processes. So it's been really interesting hearing a way that they can do so. Thank you very much for spending this time with us today, Dave.
Oh, thank you, Chris. It's been a great conversation, and it's always I always enjoy talking about the technology. You know, it's great when you love something in addition to it being your job, right? So that's definitely
Absolutely.
where I'm at with this.
And it does come out. So thank you very much again for explaining what's different about ZeroBiometrics' approach to authentication. Um, I'd like to thank everyone who has tuned in to watch this interview, and please dial up Biometric Update to read more about biometric authentication. Dial up ZeroBiometrics to learn about how you can do it more securely, and we will see you again soon.
Thanks.